Oh, I would say that Boston has 23 and a half incredible neighborhoods that are all unique and very different, but also somehow connected. So, North End is your Italian neighborhood. Chinatown is obviously fourth largest in the US. Great Chinese community, great restaurants. Then we've got some great open air space. And the downtown is the central financial district with fun and funky stuff happening. But they're all within 10 minutes walk of each other.
Welcome to Unpacked by Afar. I'm Aislinn Green, and that clip you just heard is just one of the many tips the Afar team gathered at IPW. Now, IPW is this annual travel conference organized by the U.S. Travel Association to share the best of America with the rest of the world. And in this special Unpacked episode, Afar editorial director Billie Cohen is sharing her takeaways. Over the course of 2 days, she interviewed 10 tourism board CEOs from major cities like New York and Boston, but also more under-the-radar cities like St. Louis and Buffalo, New York. If you want to hear Billie's full conversations, including her skeptical take on St. Louis pizza and why she's now obsessed with Buffalo's architectural revival, head over to our View from Afar podcast. We've linked to all of those episodes in the show notes. But first, let's unpack why these conversations left Billie more excited than ever to explore the United States. Okay, Billie, it's been a couple weeks since IPW. So how are you feeling now that you've digested the 10 interviews that you did over 2 days?
It was a lot of interviews and it was really great to talk to everyone in a row. I'll be honest, it's a lot of conversations, right? We did 19, yes. Michelle and I did 19 in a row, but certain themes started to pop up and it was just such a great, I say, introduction to the country. Not like I wasn't familiar with these places, right? I live in New York and everyone's familiar with New Orleans, for example, but you start to hear the stories that these tourism officials are talking about in their destinations. And that through line, I don't know, it felt very fun and joyful and American. And got me kind of excited to be traveling in the States in the next year or so.
Yeah, same. It was really cool to listen to all 19 of those conversations and to, like you said, see the themes, but more just from a personally, totally selfish perspective, all of these places that I want to go to now that maybe I hadn't considered before, or new pockets of them, or new reasons to go to big cities. So what were some of the themes that jumped out at you?
Well, the idea of wanting to communicate that these locations are welcoming, that no matter what else is going on in the world and how the U.S. might be perceived on a larger, bigger picture level, that individual locations and cities are welcoming and they want people both internationally and from the U.S. to come visit and feel like they belong and that they're invited. And we heard the word welcoming a lot.
We sure did. One of the things that I'm just going to jump ahead to New York, but one of the things that jumped out to me was that international travelers don't make up the bulk of travelers to New York, but financially they contribute way more than, say, a domestic traveler. And that was just one of those little pieces that stood out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that too. I think that the numbers were that international visitors make up 20% of all of the visitation, but 50% of the tourism spend overall. So the decrease in that over the past year has translated to a lot of money lost. So in terms of the takeaways and sort of challenges that U.S. destinations are facing, they are quantitative in that way, right? There's an economic hit that the different destinations are dealing with. I heard that from Patrick Kaler from Buffalo Niagara as well. He said that they rely on 35 to 40% of their overall visitation comes from Canada usually, but so far this year it's down 20%. So that's the quantitative, right? This economic impact thing. But there's also this qualitative impact as well. That's the perception that we were just talking about, trying to separate the destination from the government administration. I mean, it feels unique to the U.S. because we're dealing with, with the changes in the new administration right now. But when I travel to other places, I'm not equating the people with the government, right?
Yes.
So I think as we spoke to tourism officials, and they were leaning into that, like making sure that people could understand what their location was about and who the people were. So balancing that perception is something that they're dealing with, especially when you talk about the big cities like Boston, New York, New Orleans, even Buffalo. Like these U.S. cities they're diverse in like all definitions of the word, right? And they're really proud of that. Martha Sheridan in Boston, Julie Coker in New York, certainly Walt Lachey in New Orleans, all spoke about that diversity, different lifestyles, different cultures, different traditions, and wanting that actually to be known and to be a reason that international visitors and domestic visitors would come.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get to some of the, inspiring reasons to visit these places. But since we're talking about challenges, let's just get those out of the way. You also interviewed several CEOs who have led tourism boards during and after natural disasters, which unfortunately are happening with increasing frequency. So like Vic Isley of Explore Asheville and Tam Pygott of Fort Myers in Florida. So one of my takeaways was how important it is for people to return, for travelers to return, and possibly even sooner than you might think. So I'm curious to know what you learned that you'll factor into your own future travelers and what you might want to share with other travelers.
Yeah, it was really interesting conversations with them, and also with Walt Lachey of New Orleans, because, Katrina feels long ago, but the impact continues.
And the terror attack.
In January, and Michelle talked to Adam Burke in LA with wildfire. So this is happening more and more. And as we're speaking now, Texas is dealing with the floods. So I don't want to downplay, obviously, the tragedy and the loss of life of those disasters. But when I sat down with, tourism leader after tourism leader, it was two things were interesting. How it's sort of just become a part of their jobs to know how to deal with this or learn how to deal with this. Even Brad Dean from Explore St. Louis, he had been in Puerto Rico before, so he helped with Hurricane Maria. So it's just, you don't think of tourism as being part of the recovery effort, maybe on the first lines, but they're a big part of the long-term recovery after the fact. And that really stood out to me. But on the happier side, I guess I'd say, right?
Yeah.
What was very interesting was, yes, these destinations, they're ready a lot sooner than you think. And they need that income. It sort of creates this cycle of helping the economy recover and the people who live there recover, and also getting to spread the word. So that makes a nice, good spiral. Obviously, you want to visit with respect, right?
Absolutely.
But I heard emphatically from Vic in Asheville, their rooftop bar tours are open. There's live music. She talked about the River Arts District, which had taken on a lot of water, but now there are hundreds of galleries. And I thought it was interesting listening to Michelle's interview with Adam Burke from LA. He have a quote from him. He said people were asking him, what can we do to help after the fires? And he told them apparently, what you can do? You can visit.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Keep coming to us. Continue visiting LA. And that's what I'm hearing.
You don't even have to participate in voluntourism, which is maybe, something that a lot of people might equate with these, but it's truly just coming, renting a hotel, maybe for a weekend, going to the restaurants, going to the galleries, and then sharing that message when you return home, helping the perception.
Exactly. Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. Now, he mentioned a stat. And again, this was just me listening to Michelle's interviews because they were great. But so he mentioned a statistic where Visit California had done research to find out what people knew about the wildfires. And the average American thought that 41% of the region had been damaged by the wildfires, but it's actually less than 2%
Yes.
of the region. And again, not to downplay that was still devastating in its own way, but people's understanding of the scope of thing when you don't live there can be different. So that's where, tourism board websites are actually really helpful. I always say they're a great place to start your and Afar.com, but they're a great place to start your research because they'll give you kind of the lay of the land and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, I will say that there are many reasons to go to both Asheville and to Fort Myers. I think we were both quite excited to hop on a plane, head over there at the end of these IPW interviews. But there are also destinations that we were excited about for other reasons. And I think you and I both went into these interviews with a newfound obsession with St. Louis. Do you want to share why you were so excited to interview Brad Dean and some of the other places that you feel like, oh, maybe surprised you in, what you didn't know about them, where you want to go next?
Yeah. So St. Louis seems so interesting to me. How do I put this? So they created like this, I was going to say tourism effort, but it's really not just for tourists. It's for everybody who lives there. They are really leaning into arts and culture. There are a ton of festivals and art museums, and they're all free.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Right? And so, I mean, you think of like DC as the place for that because the Smithsonian, but here's St. Louis, and you can do all of these things, and they're free or very minimal. I learned about that a couple of years ago and just thought that was really cool. Really fascinating to find that out. And they have like surprising things there. Like there's Monet's in St. Louis.
Yeah, totally.
And then they also have this thriving opera scene because they have this opera house that commissions, I hope I have this right, they commission more original operas than any other opera house in the country. And then these operas travel. Like there was one that was commissioned by the St. Louis Opera House that performed at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. So like it's just cool. So it's a sort of probably underrated, if that's fair to say, underrated hotbed of creativity that's happening in the Midwest. And that just called to me. Plus, you've got the architecture, the arch and everything, and that was really cool. And then the other one that surprised me was Buffalo, which was sort of on my radar because I love architecture, so I knew there were a lot of Frank Lloyd Wrights there. What's happening now is, they're like restoring and renovating a lot of older buildings and attractions that I really want to go see. Like there's going to be there's a museum to Black radio. Like I didn't.
So cool.
Right? So there are these pieces of American history that are rooted in Buffalo. And I didn't know that. I didn't make that connection. As well as like the anniversary of the Erie Canal. It has a terminus there. So I want to go to Buffalo.
Same. And they're being, the way that they seem to be handling the architecture and the history is so thoughtful and sensitive. That was one of the things that jumped out to me too, is like there's just a lot of careful preservation. There was the mental hospital, I think, that's been turned into a hotel.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so there's just really, looking back at history that they want to preserve and kind of how do you translate that for a modern audience. The one thing that you will not be going to St. Louis, though, for, I think, based on your conversation, is the pizza. Yeah.
I know.
We should make it clear that you're a New Yorker and it was a hard sell. Brad knew that it was a hard sell to try to get you to come to St. Louis for the pizza. So if we go together, I'll eat it and you don't have to. I'm coming from California. So.
I'm going to try it. So for those listening, it's a thing. So they do this very thin crust pizza, like cracker-like. And then they load it up with toppings, one of which is a processed cheese.
Provel cheese?
Provel cheese.
Provel cheese.
Yeah, that apparently was created in St. Louis because it melts nicely. And it's supposedly like a mix of Swiss and provolone and cheddar. So I was skeptical. And then it's served around and they cut it in squares. And I don't know. Do you know the food writer Kenji?
Yes.
Kenji Lopez.
I just made his black bean burgers the other night.
Oh, great.
But yeah.
So I love him. And he wrote in defense of the St. Louis pizza. So I went in with that. So he was like, it's like a big pizza flavored nacho. So I think if you think about it that way.
Interesting.
Then I'm in. So I will admit, sitting down with Brad Dean from St. Louis, I was skeptical. But I've sort of since come around because you know what? I like a challenge.
Well, and like you said, maybe it's a matter of perception. If you're not thinking of it as a pizza, but as a nacho that is, that I would buy pizza nachos 100%. So I'm there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would absolutely travel for it.
You also interviewed tourism CEOs from Boston, like you mentioned, New York and Chicago, all these big cities that don't necessarily struggle to attract visitors, although right now the international travelers might be a little challenging. But what surprised you in terms of what you talked about. I mean, I was very intrigued by Boston's half neighborhood. Apparently they have 23 and a half neighborhoods, and they're very proud of that. So yeah, what jumped out to you about these big cities? What would you go for in, say, Boston?
Yeah, I think I heard Boston, New York, and New Orleans all talked about neighborhoods, right? I think
Yeah, that's another theme. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a theme, like this effort to try and make sure that people who are visiting knew that there was a city beyond the main attractions. Like, I get it, right? You come to New York, you want to go to the Empire State Building or the New York Public Library, or can't go a podcast without mentioning a library, or the Statue of Liberty. Like, of course you're going to do that, right? But so Julie Coker of NYC Tourism was talking about trying to tell stories about the boroughs, the 5 boroughs, and getting people out into the neighborhoods. Walt Leger in New Orleans was also talking about that. And of course, Martha from Boston talked about the 23 and a half. Really interesting to see. And I wonder, I'm thinking out loud here, I wonder if that focus on the neighborhoods, seems to me to serve 2 purposes. One, we talked earlier about how tourism obviously is an economic driver, right? So that spreads the economic benefits out to other communities, which is something I also talked about with a handful of people, sort of how do you serve the 2 constituencies, the people who live in a place, right, who are the residents who have to be there day to day, and the visitors. Sometimes that could feel like it's conflicting, especially in a big city where like Times Square is really crowded. I never want to be there, but I gotta go. If I'm going to a Broadway show, that's where I have to be. So how do you address both those things? And the answer that came back, one of those answers, was about neighborhoods and getting people familiar with other areas they can be. So I think that's one of the things. And then I also wonder if there's this other benefit from telling stories about the neighborhoods, is that it's like quietly or not so quietly showing off the diversity of cities and the different kinds of experiences and cultures that you can encounter when you go there.
Yeah.
Which to me as a traveler is really enticing. I talked to someone about this. I can't remember which interview it was, but the idea that if you or I are going overseas to some foreign country that we've never been to before, we hear this from readers a lot too. Like, they want to have a local experience, right? They want to have a cooking class with a local, or tour a church with the person who has restored it or something like that. And I don't know if we think about that kind of immersive travel, making those kinds of connections when we travel in our own backyard.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong for all of you listening. Maybe that is how you travel, even when you go to a town 100 miles away. But I thought this focus on neighborhoods spoke to that a little bit, like just building connections and experiential travel, which is, has been a big theme for travel in the past couple of years.
Well, and you kind of alluded to this, but this idea too, like, if over-tourism is an issue, then getting people beyond the kind of tourist hotspots is so key and does spread out that economic wealth. And there's also then the flip side of things. And I think the average traveler doesn't have to think about this, but working in the travel industry, I think we do, in that, like, I love to go to neighborhoods when I visit a place, because that's where I do feel like I get the most kind of, they're overused words, but local, authentic experience. There's not as many other travelers around. I could actually connect with somebody who lives there. But then if you recommend that place, does that then make it, does it get flooded with travelers and it's no longer a local place? Like, is that fair? I don't know. It's the challenge of, like, ruining. I think you mentioned that in one of your interviews, like ruining.
That's what we do. That's what I've done my whole career. I write about stuff and I ruin it.
Exactly.
But finding that balance is tough, right?
Yeah.
But I think being conscientious, polite, with joy, with curiosity, like, that's going to be good, Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even in a very small, dingy, loud, crowded pizza joint for a slice in New York, like, say thank you, I guess. Just be nice.
Do you have to say thank you in New York?
As I said that, I don't know if it's true. Although I will tell you, New Yorkers are a lot nicer than we get credit for. And it was fun to talk to people about misconceptions. But New Yorkers are nice.
Yes.
We just don't have time for little things. Like, when you come up out of the subway, move out of the way. Then we won't yell at you.
Yeah. Or keep up the pace or recognize. I think it's just like it's understanding the sidewalk etiquette in the place that you're at. Like that is important. When I went to DC, I heard that it was all about you have to stand on the right side of the escalator. If you don't, people will eviscerate you. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure I know where to stand on the escalator. Great. Done.
We deal with hard-hitting issues here at View from Afar, and we're unpacking the tricky topic of escalator etiquette
and sidewalk. How
and
to
sidewalk
walk in
etiquette.
New York.
It's so true. Don't walk 3 people abreast, 2 at most, and keep up the pace with everybody else.
There you go. All right.
Don't get me started.
Okay, you sounded very, very New York in that moment.
I know. I was channeling.
Is there anything else you want to share about how you're feeling about traveling around America at this point in time and how you talk about it at this moment in time?
These interviews just made me so much more excited to travel around the country, big cities, small towns. I want to see all of it. I want to talk to people. I want to eat their crazy foods, try their different pizzas. And this feels like the year to do it, right? We've got America 250 coming up in 2026. But before that, there's already anniversaries. It's New York City's 400th anniversary. There were anniversaries in Boston this year. So like there's a lot going on now. It just feels like such a cool time to be exploring the country. I'm ready. Pack your bags, Aislinn. We're going out.
Meet you in St. Louis.
I'll meet you in St. Louis.
All right. Thank you, Billie. Thanks for being here today. All right. Take care. That's all for this episode of Unpacked. If Billie's enthusiasm for St. Louis free museums, Buffalo's architectural wonders, and yes, even that controversial St. Louis pizza has you planning your next domestic adventure, don't miss her complete conversations on View from Afar. We've linked to all 10 of those episodes in the show notes. Ready for more unpacking? Visit afar.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're at Afar Media. If you enjoyed today's exploration, I hope you'll come back for more great stories. Subscribing always makes that easy, and be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platforms. It helps other travelers find it. And if you want to ask a question or suggest a topic for coverage, you can leave us a voicemail at the link in the show notes, or email us at unpackedafar.com. This has been Unpacked, a production of Afar Media. The podcast is produced by Aislinn Green and Nikki Galteland. Music composition by Chris Cullen. And remember, the travel world is complicated. We're here to help you unpack it.